Last week, Dark Side of the Ring Season 7 kicked off with back-to-back episodes on Jeff Jarrett and the battle for TNA Wrestling. This week was the finale. And so you know, Vice has released all 3 episodes in full on their YouTube channel. I hope they do that for every episode. I'm guessing they're only doing it because this was a trilogy, so they have all 3 of them up. If they do it every week, that would be amazing. But this may be the only time they do that. I liked the first 2 episodes well enough, even though it was a little too rosy when it came to Jeff Jarrett, especially when he was the champion, hogging up the main event scene in TNA for years and years. If that was anybody else, they would have been buried for it. And he deserves criticism for that. And missing the boat on people like Monty Brown when they had the chance to belt the guy up. But the 3rd episode was just a goldmine when it comes to the worst of TNA. The Dixie talent meeting. Moving Impact head-to-head with Raw. The Jeff Hardy incident at Victory Road. Dixie clinging to Hogan's leg on TV when he decided to leave the company. Oh my God, where do we even begin with this? How about where we left things with episode 2? Jarrett had been removed from power after the controversy over him and Karen Angle getting together. And Dixie, in the minds of Jeff and Karen, Dixie saw this as an opportunity to make a power play and move Jarrett out of the way. And then they also had talked about the arrival of Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff, which really, I think there's a dividing line for TNA where you have the Jarrett era, where TNA had its own distinct feel for the most part, and then the Hogan and Bischoff era, where it no longer felt like TNA anymore, especially after they got rid of the 6-sided ring, which is one of the things that separated TNA from every other U.S. promotion at that time. That was one of the first things they did when they came in. Now, me personally, I never cared for the 6 sides, and I know guys have said that it killed their bodies to bump in that ring. It has to do with the cables and stuff underneath. It's just stiffer. It didn't have as much give as the traditional 4-sided wrestling ring. So in the long run, it was good that they switched away from it. Now, had Hogan and Bischoff cited wrestler safety as the reason for the change, I don't think people would have been as mad about it. But they were total heels when they made the announcement. They sounded like assholes when they announced it. You wanted it, you got it, and now it's gone. The playpen is gone. Deal with it, right? Just a couple of real assholes about it. And let's be honest, it had nothing to do with wrestler safety to them. It had more to do with Hogan probably not wanting to bump in that ring because he knew at some point he was going to be wrestling. Give me a break. Can you imagine Hulk Hogan with his back in the shape it was in, bumping in a 6-sided ring? He would have been in a full body cast. But it was the idea of these guys coming in and changing things and moving away from what made TNA what it was. You know, to go back to something that Jarrett said at the end of the last episode when he said he thought Hogan coming in as a brand ambassador would be a great thing for TNA if it just kind of was kept to that. He's full of shit. If he honestly believed that Hogan was just coming in to be a spokesman for them and nothing more. I mean, maybe he tried to convince himself of that, but deep down, there's no way that Jeff Jarrett believed that. They covered the infamous Dixie Carter talent meeting that aired on the November 5th, 2009 episode of TNA Impact, which is still to this day one of the most embarrassing things that I've ever seen on a wrestling show. And think of all the ground that covers, even just in TNA alone. At least most of the shit that we see on TV is a work. It's just bad television. It's bad creative. This was a shoot. This was a real talent meeting that she thought was a good idea to call in the first place. And then she thought, you know what would make this even better? We'll air it on TV for all the world to see how delusional I really am. If you've listened to this podcast for longer than a decade, and I know many of you have, you remember I used to call her Delusional Dixie. I give you Exhibit B. I say Exhibit B because Exhibit A was her bringing in Hulk Hogan thinking he would give a shit about anything other than Hulk Hogan. She was completely delusional. Delusional Dixie. She calls this talent meeting thinking that she's going to rally the troops behind her when all she did was alienate most of the roster and show how out of touch she really was. She gathered them all together in the stands in the Impact Zone before that night's show. So they're all sitting in the crowd. The wrestlers are like fans. It's like a teacher gathering her class of children to lecture them. And she said, ever since I took over as the TNA president, a lot of people have told me how to run a wrestling company. and it's time for a change. She said nobody liked change or drastic moves, and while she respects those who had differing opinions of decisions that she was making, she expected them to support her 100%. When you question things in this company, you question me, and I cannot allow that to happen. Yes, dissent will not be tolerated is a great rallying message. She said that she had made the choice to put her finances and her passion behind all of the wrestlers, and it was time for them to do the same. She said they had a choice to make. They could support her in the direction that TNA was going, or they could choose not to, in which case they would need to find a new place to work. Basically, she got a lot of shit from people for bringing Hogan in, and those people either need to deal with it or leave. And look, fair enough. She's the president of the company. She made a decision that she felt was in the best interest of her company, and that would take it to new heights, right? The rocket fuel for TNA. But her tone here and deciding to air this on television was a horrendously bad decision. One that did more harm than good because all it did was kill the morale of the locker room. And it tells them, like, if we have genuine criticisms or concerns about where TNA is headed, she didn't give a shit. Keep it to yourself. Sound familiar? There are people running wrestling companies right now in 2026 who also don't like dissent, and they don't like it when people criticize them. David Sahadi, who worked in production for TNA at the time, said this is where Dixie lost control of the locker room. All the wrestlers lost respect for her after this. Velvet Sky just last year on social media, I guess somebody posted the clip, maybe it was on the anniversary or something, and she quote tweeted it. And she said, the consensus of the locker room and staff during this meeting was not one single person gave a shit what she was saying, and we actually had to take time out of production day for this nonsense from her, and it had to be filmed so that she could have her my way or the highway ego stroked even more. She was not well received by most because of the way she treated people who could do nothing for her and the way that she would talk down to people. Vile. Now, it would have been nice to hear from Dixie, what her thought process was on this. But again, she was asked to be on. She never responded to any of those requests to sit down for an interview, and so she didn't appear on any of these episodes. What's funny is that she told the wrestlers, if you don't support me or my vision, you need to find another place to work. And supposedly, Homicide and Low Key, and maybe others, did just that. They asked for their release, and they were turned down. So she immediately backed down from what she had said. It kind of reminds me of a very similar meeting that Eric Bischoff once held backstage at a WCW show, only he had enough sense not to film it and put it on TV and air it on Nitro that night. To be fair, some of those guys were out of control back then. They were saying all kinds of things publicly, and he probably did have to sit them down and talk to them. Raven was one of those people. He had gone on a radio show to complain about his position on the card and creative. So he got singled out in the meeting with a few other people. I think Conan was one, Rey Mysterio was another. And Bischoff said, anyone who doesn't want to be here, and you want their release, you can have it. And Raven took him up on the offer, and he ended up going back to ECW because there was a period where they said, okay, you can't work for WWF until your contract is up. And so he went to go work for ECW. Interesting how Eric only went after mid-card talent in that meeting and singled out mid-card talent. I don't recall him singling out any of the higher paid guys, who I'm sure were all on their best behavior like choir boys, and there were no issues with any of them not wanting to do jobs or anything else. I'm sure they were perfect little angels. So anyway, the Hogan era has begun. Hogan brings in all of his friends, right down to the Nasty Boys, who contributed absolutely nothing to TNA. It was obvious why they were there. It was an easy paycheck. Russo says that he was told that Bischoff was only in to oversee creative for Hogan because there were a lot of issues going back to Bash at the Beach 2000 with Russo and Hogan, Eric. They didn't like each other. So Russo and Eric, they had to have a clearing of the minds so that they at least knew they could work together. But again, Eric was only supposed to be overseeing creative for Hogan. But Russo says that Eric's play was to get control over everything. To which Bischoff says things evolved into him ending up leading creative. You got to be really full of shit to get me to take Vince Russo's side of things here, where Russo comes off as the sensible one and the sympathetic one, but Bischoff managed to pull that off in this episode. And then came, as I called it at that time when I covered it in real time, not the Monday Night War, but the Monday Night Skirmish. Oh my goodness. I had quite the time covering this on the Sound Of. It's like a slow motion car crash. Right? It's moving slowly. You could see it coming. It's like the iceberg, the ship hitting the iceberg, and there's just nothing you can do. Brace for impact. That's all you can do. This was an Eric Bischoff idea to move TNA Impact to Monday nights head-to-head to compete with WWE. He said that it was more about creating brand awareness. He was aware of the fact that it probably wasn't going to work, but it was more about creating brand awareness. No, it was more about trying to recreate the one great period of success that he enjoyed as a wrestling executive, which was those 83 weeks that Nitro beat Raw in the ratings. He parlayed that into 30 years of other things, all built on the back of those 83 weeks, and good for him. But here he thought, well, maybe we could recreate that magic again. That's really what was going on here. Impact, which aired on Thursdays back then, was moved to Monday nights, and they kicked off with a live 3-hour special on Spike TV, opposite Monday Night Raw. Dixie Carter had just signed Hogan and Bischoff. This was going to be their debut that night. Kevin Kay, who was the president of Spike TV at the time, said the plan would be to air quarterly specials on Mondays throughout the year, and if the ratings for this show were strong, they could move Impact to Mondays permanently. Not only did the show feature the debuts of Hogan and Bischoff, Ric Flair made his debut that night. Scott Hall returned, Kevin Nash returned, Sean Waltman, Sting, Jeff Hardy all made their return. They had debuts for Val Venus, Orlando Jordan, and the Nasty Boys. WWE countered with the return of Bret the Hitman Hart for the first time in 12 years since the Montreal Screwjob. And TNA made sure to time Hogan's entrance right at 9 p.m. when Bret was walking out on Raw. Of course, I stuck with Bret. But I admit, look, I had my finger on the remote like it was 1998 all over again. Raw had over 5.5 million viewers that night to TNA's 2.2 million. Their biggest ever audience up to that point, and in the 16 years since. They never came close to that number again, and they never will. It's impossible. Television is just different now than it was back then. Actually, they peaked with over 3 million viewers for Hogan's entrance. So that was all Spike needed to see to move the show full time. Now, again, the plan was we'll do quarterly things, and if they do well, maybe we'll do a permanent move. They saw the numbers that this debut show put up, and they got stars in their eyes. And so they just moved the show full time to Monday night starting in March. And it was an absolute fucking disaster. Like Leroy Jenkins, but in TV form. They stormed the castle, they got slaughtered, and by May, they moved the show back to Thursdays. Now, I will admit, part of me as a fan thought it was cool to have that head-to-head competition again. It's one of those things where like, you know what? Try it. If it doesn't work, you go back to doing what you were doing before. But as a fan, I think I was more starved for something fun than anything else. But I also had the benefit of not having to worry about the financial implications and the business implications of what they were doing. Them having to tuck their tail and move back to their old slot so soon after was really embarrassing. And so Bischoff is like, well, we did it to create more brand awareness. Well, you did, but in the worst possible way. You created an awareness of how sad the brand was because it just showed you retreating in defeat. And their house show numbers went down, their television ratings went down, and they were forced into retreat. It was just a really embarrassing situation. They just didn't have the money to compete with Vince McMahon. D'Lo Brown said it best in the episode. He said they were the fly on the ass of a rhino. Now, Jeff Jarrett claims that Hogan took TNA from a profitable company making money to a financial death spiral in the span of 12 months. I would love to see the documentation to prove that. It's easy to say that they were profitable and they were making money and now they weren't. It's not crazy to think with all of their expenditures that that's what happened. But I don't know that this has ever actually been verified that, TNA was making money and turning a profit, and if so, how much that profit was and how much they swung in the opposite direction after the first 12 months of the Hogan era. I don't think it's ever been verified. After that, Jarrett was asked to step back in the ring. Because remember, Dixie had basically shunned him to the side. They come to him with this idea, I want to get you back in the ring to do an angle with Kurt Angle. An angle with Angle. Playing off their real life issues over the whole Karen thing. This was a Vince Russo idea. Dixie signed off on it. And Jeff was shocked. You know, he's like, she signed off on it? She said, okay. He's like, yep. And it was easy for Jeff and Karen to play the heels with Kurt being the babyface because the fans thought that Kurt was cheated on. He was the victim in all this. He was the sympathetic one in this story, even though that's not really how it went down. But they played it that way for TV. As Karen so eloquently put it in the episode, it was a fucking storyline. And as I said last week, the two of them actually had some really good matches together. After that, they covered the Victory Road incident in 2011 with Jeff Hardy, which may be, as I think back to all of the different just examples of LOL TNA over the years, I think this is the single lowest point in TNA history. This was like the very worst of TNA. Jeff is in a much better place these days. I'm happy to see it. Jeff will tell you, though, he was a fucking mess back then. And Bischoff says they knew that Jeff was on drugs, but for the most part, he had it under control, is what he said. That was his response here. Jeff Hardy and Sting were scheduled to meet in the main event on the pay-per-view. No disqualification for Sting's title. Bischoff is one of the people, as was D'Lo Brown, who was the agent for the match, who agreed to let Jeff go to the ring that night, even though they all agreed Jeff was not in a good place. He was not in a good state. Bischoff actually said that he agreed to let Jeff go to the ring with the hope that he would just walk it off. I don't know if he said this, if he admitted to this, thinking that it would give us some sort of insight into his thought process and it would make him look better. It definitely does not make him look better. What kind of fucking answer is that? Oh, we know the man is on drugs, and this is a bad night. Clearly, he's not in his right frame of mind, and nobody can find where he is, by the way. He's supposed to go out to the ring. They're playing his music. The fact that no one thought to intervene right then and there and come up with a plan B is deplorable. Spineless, even. Jeff walks out to the ring. After a long delay, he finally walks out, almost falls over a couple of times, and is behaving very erratically. Bischoff calls an audible, finally, a little too late, goes out to the ring to very covertly communicate to Jeff that he needs to, in so many words, get the fuck out of the ring right now and go to the back. Then he goes over to Sting and he tells Sting, look, hit him with your finish, pin him, and get this over with as quickly as possible. And if you watch it, when Sting takes him down with the Scorpion Death Drop and he hooks the leg, Jeff tried to kick out. Sting had to hold him down. And he got the 3 count. Everybody is shocked. The fans are shocked. Mike Tenay and Taz on commentary, they don't know what to make of this. This is their pay-per-view main event. And it was over inside of 90 seconds. D'Lo says that there were 1 million right choices and 1 wrong one, and they made the wrong one. Yeah, I would say, to say the least. Jeff says that Jeff Hardy, the drug addict, died that night. It was a wake-up call for him. Matt said that Jeff stopped taking pills that night. I mean, that may be true, but then came, the alcohol addiction, which is a whole other story. One that Jeff Jarrett would soon find out about himself because they transitioned from this into Jarrett's own addiction issues that followed many years later. But before they get to that, we have the end of Hulk Hogan in TNA. Less than 4 years later, it is time to leave. We have bled this place dry. It is time to go back to our home planet of Titan, and take the WWE paycheck. Our time here and our work here is done. But it wasn't enough for Hogan to just disappear. No, Bischoff said that Hulk wanted to go out at least in a story on TV, which is what led to the infamous segment on Impact where Hogan tells Dixie Carter, who was offering him a new contract to stay in storyline, oh, that sounds like a great idea, great offer for someone else. I quit. And as Hogan is leaving, Dixie, the president of the company, is literally down on her knees, latching onto Hogan's leg as he's walking with her, latching onto his leg like a child as he tries to leave, and she's begging him to stay. And you wonder why Hogan always insisted on having creative control in his contracts. This is why. This woman gave him everything he wanted. She was naive enough to believe in him and his desire, right? As Hogan once said, to make TNA the #1 wrestling company in the world, which he knew was never going to happen. But she believed in it. She bought into the hype because she didn't know any better. And as Russo said in the episode, for all the money that they paid him, it was his choice, or Bischoff, probably Bischoff, who came up with the idea to have him leave the way he did and humiliate this woman on national television. She so badly wanted to be a character on the show that she thought it was a great idea. But if Hogan had creative control and this is what he wants to do, there probably wasn't much that she could do about it because she was stupid enough to let him have it in the first place. Jarrett says that he never would have allowed something like that to happen if he was the one who was still in power. He says it says everything about Dixie's knowledge of the business that she would lower herself to that and allow something like that to happen. Now, they did get into Jeff leaving TNA, starting up Global Force Wrestling. Global Force Wrestling, for those who don't know, they did a tour of around 20 dates at various minor league baseball stadiums across the country. The photo they chose to use here in the episode, they showed the 6-sided ring in virtually empty stadium. No mention of Global Force Gold. They conveniently left that out. So the deal with Global Force, really Global Force Wrestling itself, when it was formed, the idea was that it would be this global alliance of different promotions all coming together and working together. Kumbaya. And Jarrett, he announced various partnerships with New Japan and AAA. He even helped get Wrestle Kingdom in 2015 on pay-per-view in the United States. So that was the idea behind it. They taped a bunch of TV episodes. They were going to use it as pilots to shop around to different TV networks. Those episodes never saw the light of day. I think it was called Amped, like GFW Amped, I think was the name of the show. Never saw the light of day. There was litigation years later between Jarrett and Anthem over who owned the rights to the footage, and then we come to find out that Anthem said they deleted all the master tapes, so they don't exist anymore. Anyway, all of that got settled in 2021. But while GFW was still a thing, if you went to the website, you may have gotten a pop-up ad for something called Global Force Gold and a video that you would click on, and it's a video of Jeff Jarrett asking you to watch another video to find out how you can join Team Jarrett. And that other video was an ad for something called Carrot Bars, Carrot with a K, which was a German company that they dealt in precious metals, including gold bullion. Carrot Bars was said to be a Ponzi scheme, where they got people to invest in gold. Really all they were doing was selling very, very small amounts of it at a super high price, and then they would try to get you to recruit new people as a way for you to earn money. It's almost like an affiliate program, I guess, of sorts, but like the idea of like buying gold and all that, like the fact that they even got Jarrett to go on camera to shill this did not speak well to their financial situation at the time. This was not something that Jarrett was doing on his own. Like Jarrett has his podcast now, right? Podcasts have sponsors. He has sponsors. I have sponsors, right? That's kind of become the standard thing. You wouldn't even think twice if Jeff Jarrett went on his podcast or his YouTube channel and they had him shilling for a company and promoting, something, because we see that all the time. This was on the Global Force Wrestling website. This was not just Jeff Jarrett personally. This greeted you on the way. It'd be like going to WWE.com and fucking Nick Khan is sitting there in his loft, his suite at the new WWE headquarters. And he's got this great idea for you to get in on this, gold bullion and silver and all these precious metals. And all you have to do is click a link and watch the video or click the affiliate link and sign up. Like you would say, go fuck yourself. This was on the website. When you have Double J trying to sell you gold bars on the internet, it says a lot about their situation at the time. Apparently, it's lost media now. I look for it. I can't find this video for anything. I know it exists because I saw it, but it's considered lost media now. Can't find it anywhere. Maybe one day somebody will post it up again somewhere. But that was Global Force Gold. But wait, TNA then gets sold to Anthem because Dixie's father got tired of losing all of his fucking money. So they changed the name of the company from TNA to Impact Wrestling. And they floated the idea by Jarrett of a merger with Global Force. I just remember it causing a shit ton of confusion when this happened. I couldn't figure out the branding. Like, what was Impact and what was Global Force? And then they had all these titles and they were Global Force like, it was very confusing. But Jeff really thought that he could make things work again, which is why he agreed to do it, even though his wife was very skeptical. Why are you getting back in business with these people? He had escaped the asylum, so to speak, but then he got lured back in with visions of grandeur. As it turned out, there was no money. He says he was fed a bunch of bullshit. And this is where his issues with alcohol began. He would show up, he would be loaded at work, and everybody would see it. He was drinking morning, noon, and night until one day, Jeff says he was at a pool party, and he looks down and he sees a beer gut. And he said, "Not on my watch. I'm never going to have a beer gut." And that was the day that he switched from beer to vodka. Because I don't want to have a beer gut, and I've never heard of a vodka gut, so we'll just switch to vodka instead. That's the healthy choice. Vodka is the devil, by the way, okay? The one thing I would have on occasion when I would be out, like with friends, if I wasn't having like a Jack and Coke, oh yeah, give me a screwdriver, give me a vodka, whatever. If I had one, I was fucked up for the night. I said, I'm not doing this. This is ruining the whole night. This man switched to vodka and was drinking it like it was a soft drink. And then came Triple Mania in 2017, where he was just drinking in the locker room nonstop. He flew in the day before, was drinking, woke up the next morning, drinking, got to the building, drinking, and they include footage from what I believe, I want to say it was a Vampiro documentary. So they had footage of him backstage that night, and he's just gone. I mean, the man is sloshed. And what he did was very much like the Jeff Hardy thing, where people could tell that he was sloshed, and they still allowed him to go out there anyway. Only this time he started tossing tortillas out to the fans in Mexico. So after all this, Anthem was embarrassed. They wanted him to go to rehab. He did outpatient treatment 4 hours a day for 6 weeks, and he kept on drinking. And until one night, Karen confronted him about it and said, "What are you going to do here?" And he got serious about getting the treatment that he needed. She called WWE because through their wellness program, they offer rehab to talents that need it. And, look, it may have been, in his own words, a PR stunt by Vince McMahon, but it has honestly been one of the best things that company has ever done, is making those services available to talents who need it at no cost to them, even years after they're gone from the company. Who knows how many lives that they've saved with that. So Jeff said, he never really grieved Owen's death. He never really grieved the death of his first wife. He just sort of buried it deep down, and he finally confronted that and had to do so. He reconciled with his father, who he hadn't spoken to for over a decade. And then in 2018, he gets the call to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. So he gets the nice full circle moment for his career. They didn't talk about WWE hiring him the following year as a producer, and then later on promoting him to their senior vice president of live events before he was replaced by Road Dogg. There's something poetic and funny to me about the roadie taking Jeff Jarrett's job, but that's literally what happened. And then he lands in AEW, which is where he still works to this day. And they got Tony Khan to come on to talk about Jeff. I'm curious if he pops up in any other episodes this season, if they filmed anything else with Tony, or if he just agreed to sit down just to talk about Jeff Jarrett. And again, his footage in this was very, very limited at the very end of the episode. But they closed out talking about how Jeff changed the business. And Vince Russo said that if Jeff had never lost control of TNA, God knows where they would be right now. I can tell you where the TNA would be right now. TNA would either be dead or exactly where it is right now. The idea that Jeff Jarrett would have been the one to lead TNA to the promised land, or lead them to heights that no one else has been able to bring them to after nearly a quarter of a century in business, is laughable to me. And I'm not trying to throw shade on Double J. It's just the truth. Like, the glaze was very, very strong here in these episodes for him. That would be my one big critique about these episodes. But I don't think the company would be much better off than it is right now had Jarrett stayed in power. The only thing that has sustained them for all these years is the money that was poured into it. First by Bob Carter, and then later on, and to this day, by Anthem Sports. That's what keeps them afloat. And creatively or otherwise, I really don't see, Jeff Jarrett being in power over these 20 plus years. And man, TNA is so much higher than they are now. I really don't think it would have made any difference. But the wrestling business is for sure better off for having, him having founded TNA in the first place. And the opportunities that it gave talents like AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Abyss, Bobby Roode, the Motor City Machine. I mean, you can go down the list to ply their craft and get opportunities on larger platforms somewhere else. I mean, Abyss had his chance to go to WWE in 2006, but he got cold feet. He opted to stay. It also cost us, by the way, an earlier Sting run. The existence of TNA cost us Sting coming in earlier than he did to WWE. Because Dixie kept feeding him these one-year extensions to stay. But it also gave us Kurt Angle in TNA, which Kurt says was even better than his WWE run. It was definitely longer. But they were able to do all of these things because they were able to get national TV, which is not an easy thing to do. So these episodes were heavily focused on Jeff because he was the main subject, more so than TNA was. They did have an idea to do 6 episodes covering TNA. I guess that got turned down, whatever reason it didn't happen, so it morphed into this instead. So at least they found a different way, kind of a backdoor way to cover enough of the company to where it ended up being more entertaining than it would have been if it was just a Double J story and nothing more. The main characters were Jeff Jarrett and Dixie Carter, and we only got to hear from one of those main characters, which did hurt things. We got plenty of LOL TNA moments covered here. They did leave out a bunch, because, I mean, it's just impossible to cover it all in just 3 episodes. The Jenna Maraska Charmel debacle, the Claire Lynch storyline with AJ Styles, August 1st warning with the debut of Tito Ortiz, Samoa Joe being kidnapped by ninjas and returning with a penis tattoo on his face, Dixie Carter costing TNA its TV deal with Destination America. This absolutely should have been mentioned. She cost this company a TV deal because she accidentally copied the president of the network on an angry email bashing them and calling them dummies. And I think like a week later, they got canceled. I'm like, this really happened, by the way. I mean, it's just a never-ending parade of shit over the years. And yet, as Scott Steiner says in one of the episodes, TNA should have died a million deaths, but they're still here. And that really is the story of TNA, that despite it all, the odds being against them time and time again, so many wrestling companies, they fold, for one reason or another, and yet TNA lives on. Despite all of their snafus and all their brain-dead business decisions, this is the company that will not die. It will outlive us all. Or at least until WWE gets bored and eventually decides to buy them out for the tape library. That just feels inevitable.